From Studio 1A in Tampa, Florida, comes a talk show that really feels your pain and tells you like it is. We love America and all that freedom-loving Americans want to protect. Live from coast to coast and on your radio, it's For the People with Keith Allen.
We'll help you survive this thing called life. We're for the people. Whatever your source of stress or strife, for the people is there.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Keith Allen and proudly welcoming you to this Monday's edition of For the People. Things are already started right now at the House Intelligence Committe. James Comey, Mike Rogers, all testifying. And we're going to be hearing from some of those voices to find out how involved was Russia, wiretapping, and more. And wiretapping, of course, front and center. And then the involvement with key cabinet folks and Flynn and his involvement and others, and how close has been too cozy with Russia. And then also, were they involved in any process with voters and voting? And did they interfere with the electoral process? So that's what this committee is for. It's very interesting to listen to, but many of you have jobs and you don't have time to turn on the TV, so I have cut up the audio so you can hear some opening statements quite revealing of where this is going and what is going to happen. I'm thinking that this needed to take place for so many different reasons, to put to bed something that a lot of Americans already know, and many people in the Intelligence Committee know this already, but there's those on the left that will say, and have been saying, that Russia had been directly responsible for Donald Trump making it into the presidency, which I think is preposterous. However, you got to put it to bed once and for all so people don't think that, so we can move on. So it's public hearing. It's very good. So Devin Nunes, he is the Intel Committee chair, and here is some opening statements from him.
Part of this committee's investigation into Russian active measures during the 2016 election, it is critical to ensure that the public has access to credible, unclassified facts and to clear the air regarding unsubstantiated media reports. To our guests in the audience, welcome. We appreciate you being here. I also expect that the proper decorum will be observed at all times today, and that disruptions during today's proceedings will not be tolerated. I now will recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purpose of an opening statement. The Putin regime has a long history of aggressive actions against other countries, including the outright invasion of two of its neighbors in recent years, as well as its brutal military action in Syria to defend the Assad regime. But its hostile acts take many forms aside from direct military assaults. For example, the Kremlin is waging an international disinformation campaign through the RT propaganda network, which traffics in anti-American conspiracy theories that rival the extravagant untruths of Soviet-era bravado. Russia also has a long history of meddling in other countries' election systems and launching cyber attacks on a wide range of countries and industries. The Baltics and other Russian neighbors have long decried these attacks, but their warnings went unheeded in far too many nations' capitals, including our own. The fact that Russia hacked U.S. election-related databases comes as no shock to this committee. We have been closely monitoring Russia's aggression for years. A year ago, I publicly stated that our inability to predict Putin's regime plans and intentions has been the biggest intelligence failure that we've seen since 9/11, and that remains my view today. However, while the indications of Russian measures targeting the U.S. presidential election are deeply troubling, one benefit is already clear. It has focused wide attention on the pressing threats posed by the Russian autocrat. In recent years, committee members have issued repeated and forceful pleas for stronger action against Russian belligerents, but the Obama administration was committed to the notion, against all evidence, that we could reset relations with Putin, and it routinely ignored our warnings. I hope today's hearing will shed light on three important focus points of the committee's investigation on Russia active measures. First, what actions did Russia undertake against the United States during the 2016 election campaign? And did anyone from political campaign conspire in these activities? Number two, were the communications of officials or associates of any campaign subject to any kind of improper surveillance? The intelligence community has extremely strict procedures for handling information pertaining to any U.S. citizens who are subject even to incidental surveillance, and this committee wants to ensure all surveillance activities have followed all relevant laws, rules, and regulations. Let me be clear. I've been saying this for several weeks. We know there was not a physical wiretap of Trump Tower. However, it's still possible that other surveillance activities were used against President Trump and his associates. Number three, who has leaked classified information? Numerous current and former officials have leaked purportedly classified information in connection to these questions. We aim to determine who has leaked or facilitated leaks of classified information so that these individuals can be brought to justice. I hope that this committee's bipartisan investigation will result in a definitive report on the Russian actions taken during the election campaign. To that end, we encourage anyone who has information about these topics to come forward and speak to the House Intelligence Committee. I again thank the witnesses for helping shed light on these issues, and I will recognize Ranking Member Schiff. He's asked for 15 minutes for his opening statement, so I will go ahead and give him 15 minutes for his opening statement.
All right, before you do that, Devin Nunes, Director Comey says the Russians wanted to hurt democracy at this moment and hurt Clinton, help Trump. Very interesting. Well, maybe perhaps he had a dog in the fight. But there wasn't a bunch of Russians going to the polls. And then also the lying media, the deceptive media, the garbage media, and not even to say that Putin is all ethical in himself by winning re-election himself in the way that he treats his people and the way that he just decided to go into Crimea, and the things that he's done are just terrible, awful. But these hearings are necessary, and we're going to just break it down one by one so you can hear for yourself, again, what people are saying. And Schiff, you want to listening very, very closely. This is Ranking Member Schiff as he opens up a little bit this morning. So here he is.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you. And I also want to thank Director Comey and Admiral Rogers for appearing before us today as the committee holds its first open hearing into the interference campaign waged against our 2016 presidential election. Last summer, at the height of a bitterly contested and hugely consequential presidential campaign, a foreign adversarial power intervened in an effort to weaken our democracy and to influence the outcome for one candidate and against the other. That foreign adversary was, of course, Russia, and it acted through its intelligence agencies and upon the direct instructions of its autocratic ruler, Vladimir Putin, in order to help Donald J. Trump become the 45th President of the United States. The Russian active measures campaign may have begun as early as 2015, when Russian intelligence services launched a series of spear phishing attacks designed to penetrate the computers of a broad array of Washington-based Democratic and Republican Party organizations, think tanks, and other entities. This continued at least through the winter of 2016. While at first the hacking may have been intended solely for the collection of foreign intelligence, in mid-2016 the Russians weaponized the stolen data and used platforms established by the intel services such as DC Leaks and existing third-party channels like WikiLeaks to dump the documents. The stolen documents were almost uniformly damaging to the candidate Putin despised, Hillary Clinton. And by forcing her campaign to constantly respond to the daily drip of disclosures, the releases greatly benefited Donald Trump's campaign. None of these facts is seriously in question, and they are reflected in the consensus conclusion of our intelligence agencies. We will never know whether the Russian intervention was determinative in such a close election. Indeed, it is unknowable in a campaign in which so many small changes could have dictated a different result. More importantly, and for the purposes of our investigation, it simply does not matter. What does matter is this: the Russians successfully meddled in our democracy and our intelligence agencies have concluded they will do so again. Ours is not the first democracy to be attacked by the Russians in this way. Russian intelligence has been similarly interfering in the internal and political affairs of our European and other allies for decades. What is striking here is the degree to which the Russians were willing to undertake such an audacious and risky action against the most powerful nation on earth. That ought to be a warning to us, that if we thought that the Russians would not dare to so blatantly interfere in our affairs, we were wrong. And if we do not do our very best to understand how the Russians accomplished this unprecedented attack on our democracy and what we need to do to protect ourselves in the future, we will only have ourselves to blame. We know a lot about the Russian operation, about the way they amplified the damage their hacking and dumping of stolen documents was causing through the use of slick propaganda like RT, the Kremlin's media arm. But there is a lot we don't know. Most important, we do not yet know whether the Russians had the help of U.S. citizens, including people associated with the Trump campaign. Many of the Trump's campaign personnel, including the president himself, have ties to Russia and Russian interests. This is, of course, no crime. On the other hand, if the Trump campaign, or anyone associated with it, aided or abetted the Russians, it would not only be a serious crime, it would also represent one of the most shocking betrayals of democracy in history. In Europe, where the Russians have a much longer history of political interference, they have used a variety of techniques to undermine democracy. They employed the hacking and dumping of documents and slick propaganda, as they clearly did here. But they have also used bribery, blackmail, compromising material, and financial entanglement to secure needed cooperation from individual citizens of targeted countries. The issue of U.S. person involvement is only one of the important matters that the chairman and I have agreed to investigate, and which is memorialized in the detailed and bipartisan scope of investigation that we have signed. We'll also examine whether the intelligence community's assessment of the Russian operation is supported by the raw intelligence, whether the U.S. government responded properly or missed the opportunity to stop this Russian attack much earlier, and whether the leak of information about Michael Flynn or others is indicative of a systemic problem. We have also reviewed whether there is any evidence to support President Trump's claim that he was wiretapped by President Obama in Trump Tower, and found no evidence whatsoever to support that slanderous accusation. And we hope that Director Comey can now put that matter permanently to rest. Today, most of my Democratic colleagues will be exploring with the witnesses the potential involvement of U.S. persons in the Russian attack on our democracy. It is not that we feel the other issues are less important, they are very important, but rather because this issue is least understood by the public. We realize, of course, that the witnesses may not be able to answer many of the questions in open session. They may or may not be willing to disclose even whether there is an investigation. But we hope to present to you, directors, and the public why we believe this is a matter of such gravity that it demands a thorough investigation, not only by us, as we intend to do, but by the FBI as well. Let me give you a short preview of what I expect you'll be asked by our members. Whether the Russian active measures campaign began as nothing more than an attempt to gather intelligence, or was always intended to be more than that, we do not know, and is one of the questions we hope to answer. But we do know this. The months of July and August 2016 appear to have been pivotal. It was at this time the Russians began using the information they had stolen to help Donald Trump and harm Hillary Clinton. And so the question is, why? What was happening in July, August of last year? And were U.S. persons involved? Here are some of the matters drawn from public sources alone, since that is all we can discuss in this setting, that concern us and we believe should concern all Americans. In early July, Carter Page, someone candidate Trump identified as one of his national security advisors, travels to Moscow on a trip approved by the Trump campaign. While in Moscow, he gives a speech critical of the United States and other Western countries for what he believes is a hypocritical focus on democratization and efforts to fight corruption. According to Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence officer who is reportedly held in high regard by U.S. intelligence, Russian sources tell him that Page has also had a secret meeting with Igor Sechin, CEO of the Russian